meeting. Obviously, we have it's been some time since we last met, so you will have to have a good memory when it comes to approving the minutes. But yeah, welcome to you all. Since the last meeting, we've actually gone through the AGM process, which means we need to reset the terms of reference. And if, as members, you would note item 1, membership in terms of reference. Thank you. Apologies.
Yes, Chair, we've received apologies from Councillors Dunn and Towns and Mr Bezic and Mrs Milner.
Thank you very much. You have had the minutes of the previous meeting circulated. What I am seeking is approval that they are a true record. And could I please have somebody to propose? Thank you, Councillor. And second. Thank you, Councillor Cecily. It's been agreed, yes, sorry. Item 4, disclosure of interests. You're all well-versed and experienced members. You know what the situation is in relation to disclosures. We have not had any specifically sent to us in relation to any matters on the agenda. But does any member have anything they wish to declare at this point? Thank you. If we move to item 5, the appointment of the independent chair to the Standards Committee. Neil, do you want to say a little bit, and then we'll perhaps ask Councillor Stewart, who had chaired the panel?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Of course, members will be familiar with this matter. Certainly, it's in the minutes, and you can see that there has been an unsuccessful previous attempt to fill the role of independent chair of Standards Committee. The Council does operate an independent chair of Standards Committee in accordance with good guidance. And as well, Chair, and I think to your credit, you raised this point with us some time ago, that it is good practice to rotate the chair on a regular basis. I know in previous years it's been very difficult to do that. So to update members, there has been a further recruitment process which was carried out this year, and I'm pleased to say that we did receive 3 applicants, and the interview panel appointed by this committee of Councillor Reid, Councillor Stewart and Councillor Dunn met on the, I believe it was the 16th of September 2024 to consider the applications and interviewed the applicants. And they came to a conclusion on that date and have made a recommendation which members well, I'll pass over to Councillor Stewart in a second, but just to refer members to the recommendation on the report on page 15, members will see that they are to receive a report of the interview panel. In effect, what that means is that I'll be asking Councillor Stewart just to give a summary of his findings of the panel on that date.
Thank you, sir. And Chair, with your permission, yes, as indicated by Mr Musson, we did hold a session. We interviewed the applicants. All are very high standards. The process was carried out in accordance with the recommendations and the procedures set out. We're delighted to present today the recommendation that Mr Openshaw's the candidate, successful candidate, move forward. Appreciate there is a process to go through now, Mr Musson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, that is correct, Chair. What we are asking the committee to do is make a recommendation to full council. It has to be an appointment made by full council. So that is the recommendation before you today. And Mr Openshaw is obviously in the room at the moment and is our current independent person, just for information. So the recommendations are there on page 15, Chair, and they're before members.
Councillor Sesford.
Yes, Chair. I'm sure the process is brilliant. The right candidate has been chosen, and we'll find that out in just a second. But am I mistaken in the fact that when we're ratifying something, do we not get some information about the candidates beforehand? I know we've done this before, and we usually have some pink papers attached, and so we can at least, those who weren't on the selection committee, we can at least get a gist of the chap or chapess.
It's been the practice in recent times, Councillor, that we don't do that, and we rely on the interview panel, just on the basis that that is the purpose for which they've been appointed. So yeah, it was a conscious decision.
Will it be something
not to
that
do
pink
that.
papers on the full council meeting then? Because I definitely
If
remember
that is a
receiving-
recommendation of this, sorry, Councillor, for interrupting.
No, I was just going to say, I definitely remember receiving them before. Now, maybe I'm mistaken, it's actually the full council that they go to, so I'm just wondering if there's anything going to the full council, or is there nothing at all now?
It will be going to full council for formal appointment.
I'm thinking more of acknowledgement, because there's 3 people who've done the appointment here, but there's 67 councillors and the full council, and they may want to have something suggesting, giving them some information on the candidate, because if we don't know that now, so we don't get that information then, you might find other questions being asked to the full council about that.
Right, so I think the idea, Chair, is to avoid having, in effect, another interview process at that stage. I understand that Mr. Openshaw wouldn't be there, but I can say maybe the solution, Chair, is to take that point forward and consider it before full council.
I think it's more of an information for the people who don't know Simon. You know, it's nice to have a little bit of background. You know, where he's come from. The panel obviously know that. The rest of the councillors, the other 63 councillors, won't know that.
Can I just ask, Neil, is it at all possible to accede to the request in terms of information supplied to full council? The difficulty being that it does generate another debate and discussion.
It doesn't usually, Chair, but obviously that can be the case. I think what I will do, Chair, is take that point back to the monitoring officer, because at the end of the day, it's the monitoring officer who will decide that point. But of course, you know, we can take account of this committee's comments and views.
Councillor Flux.
I'm just going to say, as former chair of the council, I'm sure that's something that you, Neil, would discuss with the chair and the monitoring officer at your pre-briefings as to what's most appropriate, and I would trust their judgment as to what's most appropriate. Thank you.
Are you satisfied with that, councillor, or would you like to come back?
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
Are you happy with that solution, or would you like to come back?
No, I'm happy with that solution. Just as I said, I have seen it on pink papers on other appointments that we've had. And so I was just a bit surprised we didn't get it, but, you know, that's fine.
Right. Is there likely to be further debate? Because if so, I'll ask Simon to leave so we can have further debate. Excellent. Can I just thank the panel for all their efforts in relation to the matter and for coming to a conclusion. I think what we would like to do now, or I would like to do, is seek the approval of the committee in relation to putting forward the report and recommendation to full council. So can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Grimshaw, and seconded by Councillor Lee. Thank you both. So we've had the proposal. Is everybody in agreement?
Great, Chair.
Great. Thank you. So the next item, item 6, is in relation to the Standards Committee update. Again, Neil.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, Chair, this is our regular update which we bring to every meeting of the Standards Committee. It contains the usual information. What we usually try and do is give members a sense of, firstly, the numbers of complaints and how they compare to previous years, but also maybe the types of complaints in terms of who they are made against. So I've just pulled out a few pertinent facts, and then, of course, I'll be available to answer any questions from members. Pleasingly, the number of complaints, just on bare numbers, seems to be down this year from previous years. But quite significantly, the number of complaints made by members against members and involving officers and members, we haven't had any of those complaints this year, which is pleasing. In terms of the nature of the complaints, I think it's fair to say that they are, at the moment, seem to be predominantly complaints against parish councillors. County council members, very few and far between. And in terms of, I suppose I would describe it as the quality of the complaints, members can see from Appendix 2 on page 25 that a number of these complaints are listed as no further action, threshold not met, or no jurisdiction. So no jurisdiction may mean that the complaint was complaining. The complainant was complaining about a member when they weren't acting in their role as a member, or they may be complaining about things which are essentially service matters or procedural matters, not actually about, you know, bad behaviour and conduct as such, things like respect and bullying. When it gets to threshold not met, really that's getting in. A lot of the reasons for that not going any further might be just the evidence, or just particularly how serious the matter is. And there are a couple of matters there where local resolution has been sought, and if a complaint does reach the threshold for further investigation, what we will do at that stage is see whether the matter can be informally resolved, and what that means is usually by way of an apology is quite often all that's required, or it can involve member training, which we would do on a one-to-one basis. We would invite the subject member in and spend a few hours with them, going through the issues and giving them training. So Chair, I think overall, I think officers, there are some, obviously in a perfect world we wouldn't get any complaints, but I think a lot of the complaints haven't really been justified, if that's the right word. So I think that's there is quite a pleasing aspect that can be taken from members. We're not seeing complaints that have been made in previous years, which might have been of a more serious nature, or lots of complaints against members by other members, for example, which wouldn't be a good reflection, really. So that's the information, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions if members have them.
Well, in terms of interference, Neil, the question that I would have is, can you see a particular reason why things have got better? Has there been something in terms of the change of approach? Has the introduction of the extra independent persons made that an easier process?
I think just on the independent persons, Chair, and unfortunately, our other two independent persons couldn't be here today, but we have Simon. Now that we have three, it's really helped officers determine a lot of these complaints, certainly within a more timely fashion, I would say. There was a time a few years ago where, you know, we were really stuck in a bit of a backlog, and the independent persons have really helped that situation. I don't think it's made any difference to the complaints actually coming in. It's the process after that, Chair. I don't know, Chair, that there has, of course, been the independent governance review a couple of years ago, and I think you can look at the data and say that there has been a change since then, but that's really just something that members may want to comment on. But that seems to be the only point in time where things have really changed in terms of member-on-member complaints, for example.
Any members, any questions for Neil? Any comments?
Yeah, I'm going to guess the time, but we'd say it was a couple of years ago when there was obviously a high proportion of these. One of the questions that somebody on the panel asked, I can't actually remember who it was to do with the repetition of complaints. And it was agreed at that stage that that would be shown somewhere in a report. You know, what I'm trying to say is if, say, somebody keeps making the same complaint or several different complaints about the same person. Now, am I to assume that all these complaints here are all separate and individual, because there's nothing to say there's been any repetitiveness on this?
I think that is very much the case, Councillor.
That's a good question, Councillor, and it is the case that the figures for this year, for example, which I should say that are now up to 18 due to a few coming in after this, but a number of those could be classed as one complaint. So unfortunately, I've not set it out here, but I'll bear that in mind for our next meeting. And I think it may be that we just class those as one complaint. So some of the recent complaints that have come in, I would say, for example, where we've listed, see, a complaint comes in, it gets our unique reference number, so it goes on the system as a separate complaint. But 3 of the more recent ones all arose out of the same incident, so you could class that as one complaint. So the real number, if you go on that basis, would be lower than the 18, I would say.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Excellent. Any other comments? Can I have a proposer in relation to the report? Thank you, Councillor Flux. Seconded by Councillor Sesford. Thank you. The next item is something that I like. It's something of an open mic, to some extent free for all. Obviously controlled as much as I can. But what obviously we have discussed as a standards committee is training and the various types of training that members need, especially new members, especially people who are likely to be involved in something like the standards committee. So self and Neil have had a fairly brief discussion, and it was brief, because I'm very keen on driving that training programme forward. And Neil has got some items that he will bring to our attention after the meeting in a more informal situation. But at this stage, I think what we'd like to do, and Neil, you might want to expand, is start everybody thinking about what it is we're going to look at in terms of training, and how we're going to try and deliver that. So, Neil, if you'd just like to take it from there.
Certainly, Chair. I suppose the first point I would make is just to go back to our terms of reference. Terms of reference include advising, training, or arranging to train members. So I think when we were considering what training we should provide, certainly next year, after the elections, when we'll have an influx of new members. What form should that? What should it look like, basically? Now in the past, you'll recall that I think on the last 2 occasions, we've had an external provider, Bethan Evans, come in and provide training to all members, really in the form that we invite all 67 members. Hopefully everyone turns up in the council chamber. And I know Bethan wasn't here, officers were, but the training is provided to all members in one go over, say, a couple of hours. And it covers the whole breadth of the code of conduct and all related matters. I have been to a few training events throughout the year where it was very much more looking at the actual issues that come up time and time again. So it made us think really that, you know, should we be spending a lot of time, even if it's in one session, spending 20 minutes of a session training members on something that they're never going to come across? Why not spend more time going over in a more of a short and snappy sort of format, case studies, that sort of type of thing, on issues that they, you know, if we get hearings, for example, or they may even come across in their normal everyday life as a councillor, those sort of issues again. So that's very much the way that we would like to progress. I mean, members may think that a session such as the one we had last time, which encompasses the breadth of the issues that can come up in codes of conduct. You know, for example, you know, there are about 10 different requirements in our code of conduct, not to bring the council into disrepute, for example, compliance with our various protocols. But the issues that come up time and time again can be, you know, shortlisted really down to a few. I mean, in terms of those actual segments, you know, the requirements, respect and bullying are the two most common causes of complaint. But there are other issues as well that I want to discuss with members a little bit, which I think may be really useful. So what we thought was that during the public part of the meeting, we could just have a general sort of sharing of views as to what you've thought about the training in the past, whether you will want to see that replicated, or what you would prefer in the future, but also what sort of issues come up in your, you know, daily role as a councillor, which might bring out, you know, certain new areas that we should include within the training. So Chair, I think, as we discussed before, the idea is that we have a general discussion about that. I have prepared, well, the dreaded slides. Really, it's just a series of scenarios, so you'll get a flavour of, you know, how we want to do this really, and it is really putting up some invented or half invented, because a lot of them are rooted in a bit of reality, case studies which make the point basically. But I think they're not really for public consumption. So what I would propose is that we have that sharing of views now, and then we're at the end. We'll be near the end of the agenda. So if members afterwards could stay behind, maybe for 10 or 15 minutes, and we'll put some of them case studies up on the screen. We treat it just as an informal training session. And what's really useful is that we've got one of our independent persons here, Simon, who can share his views, because just so members are aware, every complaint that comes into us, we have to under our procedures, we have to get the views of one of our independent persons. And our independent persons, quite deliberately, are not legally trained, because we're very conscious that, you know, a lawyer like myself might have a certain view on a matter, but what's important is how a layperson may see the same set of circumstances. So I've invited Simon to say a few words, you know, when we get to that stage. So, Chair, I suppose the first question I would ask members is how they've found the previous sessions, and what I'm talking about. I believe one of them was during lockdown, and we did it over Teams. And then after that, we came into the council chamber, and officers were here. I think Bethan Evans was on the screen above, but officers obviously were here to contribute. So that was around an hour and a half, 2 hours for the whole breadth of the code of conduct. So I was just interested how members felt about that. Would you like to see that again? Or was that tortuous? I don't know.
I'll kick off then. I think the chances of you getting 67 councillors into a room for a couple of hours, good luck to you. But there's not much chance of that happening. So personally, I think you'd get a far better turnout if you did it online.
Was that, Councillor, if we did it online?
Yes.
Yeah.
Councillor Sessler.
Yeah. Of the two options that you gave us, I mean, the first option, you cover everything, and it's not always, you know, fireworks going off all the time, shall I say. The second option, though, when you're giving us case studies and things like that, I think that's more relevant, more appropriate. You know what it is that you get more often than not, so therefore we're getting stuff that we may come across, or at least we don't understand the process a lot better. So I would think the second way was probably more acceptable. I agree with Councillor Stewart. You'll never, even when you have mandatory training, it doesn't work. You don't get everybody in, but it can be offered to them, whether it's in here and they don't turn up, or online, and they might maybe not all turn up either. So I'm not really bothered about whether it's in the chambers or whether it's online, but I do think that the more relevant second option would be the best.
Councillor Flux.
Yeah, I'll make some more points in private, but excuse me. My view on the whole situation is that we've got a lot less complaints because members have largely learnt that the threshold for dealing with something at standards is much higher than what people assumed it was several years ago. And what I'm sure we wouldn't want to see is a whole new tranche of councillors getting elected who have got that mindset that members used to have here, that, you know, if you, more than once I heard the phrase, if you don't like it, go to standards. Well, that's not really what standards is about or what standards is for. And it's not about whether you like someone or you don't like someone. And I think we've successfully got the mindset right now. And so I think any training that reflects keeping that mindset in a good place, I think would be welcomed. Just to say, the online one was pretty good, I thought. It was quite engaging. It was relatively fun for what could be a dry subject, so.
Well, I'm all for making standards fun, Chair. You haven't seen the slides yet.
It's a serious subject, I know.
Well,
Interactive rather than fun.
interactive,
Yeah.
Councillor. Yeah. I mean, that was the purpose of the, and members will see the slides, but, you know, trying to get a few interesting case studies, but that's why we thought. And I think, Councillor, one of the options is sort of short and sweet sort of training, and it can be a mix of online and in person. Maybe pick an appropriate days, you know, when we know a lot of members are going to be in. But I've found with other types of training that if you limit numbers, of course you've got to do more sessions, but it's a lot more interactive, and it feels a lot more useful that the messages are going in. And I think, just to pick up on a point, managing expectations, I think that was the point Councillor Flux was making. I think, councillors need to be aware of the limitations of the process as well as what it's there for. I mean, just to written something down, it says in the code, the fundamental aim of the code is to maintain public confidence in the role of the councillor. So, I mean, as we'll probably see a little bit later, there are limitations, but that shouldn't stop the overall ethos of the code. And that's what this committee's here for, Chair, you know. So, I mean, we'll get onto that with the session that we'll have afterwards. So it is possible to do a mixture, and we can have a big, longer session and also offer shorter issue-based sessions, or we can try, so in the first week following elections, when members are coming in and signing their declarations of office, we can set up a number of sessions there, maybe one a day, for members to drop in. That might be one idea, but it won't cover everything. It'll just be the what we consider the most important sort of aspects of it. like there might be that declarations of interest, for example, and I don't know. I mean, part of my question before was to ask about issues that you face and things which might be a little bit vague in your knowledge. So if there are any things like that, and declarations of interest often comes up in that sort of category. So if members feel that that might be something that we include in the training itself, it might be able to be included or be done separately. I mean, we haven't discounted providing materials, maybe digitally, electronically, to assist with that. So it's, I mean, this is the opportunity really just to, if members think that's a good idea, anything's a good idea really, just to say, and we can take that forward. Or we could have a, you know, if we finish the meeting and go into our informal session, that's what we treat it. It's not a formal training session as such, but it will be along those along the lines of an informal bit of training. Those points might come up during that, so it might be by the time we get to the end of that, we might have a better idea of how the training should look next year.
View it as a taster. I think we need to give some thought as well as to how we advance the training for parish and town councils. We've got a fairly extensive geography and an awful lot of councillors, and it may well be that online is the way forward in those terms. We also may well have to think about the alternative forms of delivery and who's going to be engaged in delivering. Because obviously if it's done in-house, it's a lot of work.
It is, Chair, and I think sometimes in the past that's been one of the reasons for getting the expertise as well of a very well-renowned individual in the field. But of course, providing training, especially the shorter form of training in-house, probably helps officers as well, and help our independent persons as well, just you know, concentrate on the issues. And you know, we never say we always know it all. It's a good refresher for officers as well. But yet, of course, there is an amount of work that goes into it. But I think worthwhile, I would say.
Any opportunities to look at regional collaboration?
You know, that's interesting, Chair. We've I mean, fairly good contact with the monitoring officers from around the region, but we've never discussed sharing resources in that respect. But it's certainly something I could look into.
Good. Any further thoughts? It's easy for me to say. No? Oh, Simon.
You can.
You can, this is informal.
I think I would echo a lot of the comments that you covered really, which is that when I started as an independent person, I had...
Simon, you have to press your button on your mic.
Sorry, lesson number 1, press the button before you speak. So I think I would echo quite a lot of the comments that have already been made. When I started as an independent person, I had the code of conduct, I had the guidelines, and I had the training video. And having gone through all of that, pretty much probably the first half dozen complaints, I then had to go and reread everything. So I think the idea that to try and teach everything or roll out the guidelines and the code of conduct, I think is quite a dry subject and won't engage. I think the case studies is much more relevant, and that's almost what I've seen in the examples of the complaints that I've seen, is that you then can go back to the code of conduct. So I think that's one point, and I think the case studies and specific examples around the threshold is also very important. So for me, short and sweet case studies, and something that can be rolled out to parish council and town council in an external video or PowerPoint or pre-recorded would be instantly available. And could be sent to councillors for them to confirm that they've undertaken the training if they don't attend anything face-to-face.
Excellent, thank you. If there isn't any further comment or debate, can I close that particular element off? Which brings us to the last item on the agenda, which is any other urgent business. Does any member have any urgent business they wish to bring to the table?
There hasn't been any submitted. Chair.
No. Good. That being the case, I'm going to take a chair's prerogative, and although it isn't urgent, and although it's likely to be worthless, I will take an opportunity in any other business just to say how much I have enjoyed being the chair of this committee. I've worked with an awful lot of members, all of whom, without exception, have contributed strongly, have made the job of the chair particularly gratifying, because the panel here comes in to work as a unit. In a lot of committees, the politics reigns. In this committee, what I've found, generally speaking, is that that's not the case, and you're to be commended for that. I'd like to also thank Neil and his predecessors who have guided me through this entire process and have been excellent in terms of providing reports. Fortunately, recently, we haven't had much in the way of hearings, but certainly in the first few years of my appointment, we had several hearings, all of which are sporty, can be deeply unpleasant, but worthwhile because it gives us learning, and worthwhile because it gives settlement to difficult situations. So, Neil, if you would pass my thanks on to the rest of the staff. Councillor Flux.
As Vice Chair of this committee, I think I'd like to pass on all of our gratitude as members of the committee for your time as Chairman. I think you've done an excellent job over many, many years, and you're to be commended for it, and you go with our best wishes. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those kind words, and with that, I think we can happily close the meeting, but by all means remain seated for the main event.